traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. Your next stop, the Twilight Zone.
There is a fifth dimension beyond that which is known to man. It lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area that we call the Twilight Zone. Yes, we're here to see Rod Serling's grave. What a revolutionary man. What an amazing creator. And of course, I, like many of you, am a Twilight Zone fanatic. We're in a little town called Interlaken. It is by Cayuga Lake, the Finger Lakes here. I put my fingers up because if you look at a map, they look like fingers. Upstate New York here. Boy, this is a big state. When I think of New York, if you're like me, New York is New York. And we're like 4 or 5 hours from New York to the west. That said, let's talk about Rod Serling. What an amazing story. And let's take a walk through this old cemetery. And I will tell you his story. As we look at some graves, of course, as we usually do. Beautiful day here in New York. Just got here last night. So Rod Serling was born December 25th, 1924, up in Syracuse. It's to the northeast of us here. And his family was of Jewish descent. Rod's father had worked as a secretary and amateur inventor before his kids were born. But he took on his father-in-law's profession as a grocer so that he could support the family. Now, as Rod was growing up, his father, Sam, he really encouraged him to... He had talents. I mean, one of the things that he did, he had that great imagination, but he was like just as a child, he was a showman. And he would do performances at home. And his parents would really encourage that. So he would do plays and stuff for the family. And they would say on long car rides to go on vacation, he'd be in the back seat. And even if no one was listening to him, he was like reciting, talking, doing his thing. He's quite a character. Quite a character. So he grew up with his parents, really good, solid family life, and a lot of encouragement. His dad even built him a small stage in the basement, and his older brother, Robert, who was a writer, would talk about all those stories. They were both similar. They'd rely on each other. They'd bounce things off each other. But he would say, Rod would often ask questions without waiting for their answers. And they really got a kick out of him. Now, in elementary school, Rod was seen by classmates as a class clown. He was dismissed by many, like his teachers, as I don't want to say a loser, but I got to tell you, it's like my story. I did not do well in school, and I was always goofing off. I was bored, and his 7th grade teacher, though, a woman named Helen Foley, encouraged Rod to enter the school's public speaking program, and he got on the debate team, and at his high school graduation, he was the speaker. So he started finding his way. He was always interested in radio. And of course, he loved to write. And he would sit by the radio and just, listen to the thrillers and the horror shows and the fantasy, and he would just be in awe. So he's completely hooked. But World War II came, and he did the right thing. He enlisted in the Army. right after he graduated from high school. I believe his brother Robert had enlisted, so he followed him. But 1943, he was at the same camp as the Band of Brothers, not with the Band of Brothers, but he was at Camp Toccoa in Georgia. So he must have climbed that hill we all know. Not all of us, but those of you who know Band of Brothers, the crazy jog with all your stuff up the hill that would just about kill everybody. So he was there. And he was a little bit of an oddball. And he was assigned to the Pacific Theater. And he did get into some action there, but I always thought he was just not thinking, like not loading his ammunition and doing weird things. He was in the 511th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 11th Airborne Division, and you know, was a paratrooper. Now, he was a boxer, and he did pretty good as a flyweight. He had a pretty good record. And, you know, ended up, he wanted to go to Europe to fight the Germans, but of course, as I mentioned, he ended up in the Pacific. New Guinea. He ended up in the Philippines. If you've heard of the Battle of Leyte Gulf, brutal battle, MacArthur coming back, they say that, and I don't know if it's they say, I think he said, there was a lot of interviews, of course, and he said that whole war experience really shaped his life, shaped his views, shaped his writing, and we see that in a lot of his episodes, those episodes that would always have the twist at the end. But remember you know, a lot of World War II stuff. Pilots, I remember going through time warps, or being put out in the desert, crashing, and a lot of that time dilation stuff that I actually really love. I think that's why I love the Twilight Zone. But getting back to the story, his unit ended up in Manila. You know, we were taking the Philippines back. Island hopping, we finally got up, you know, that whole story. But Manila, it was a block-by-block battle. He had to rescue a fellow performer, and it really showed his bravery. And he went out and pulled him in. Now, his regiment had a 50% casualty rate, over 400 men killed. Now, he was wounded, and 3 of his comrades were killed by shrapnel from rounds by an anti-aircraft gun. And he was awarded the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, Philippine Liberation Medal. So he came back, but he had a lot of nightmares and flashbacks, actually for the rest of his life. And I think that, again, that influenced a lot of his writing. So it all started after the war. He's taking odd jobs for radio stations, and he started by working at a radio station called WNYC in New York. He's an actor and writer in the summer of '46. The next year he worked at that station as a paid intern. Again, taking odd jobs, just trying to do anything he could. He started in the 1950s, early 1950s, starting his writing. And he was in Cincinnati, Ohio, and WKRC TV, Cincinnati, doing testimonials, advertisements. He's kind of bored, but he's writing these scripts, and these scripts were, as we know, pretty revolutionary. And they were getting rejected one after another, but he just kept persevering. He believed in himself. And as, you know, one luck would have it, or I guess timing would have it, one of his ideas came out and was taken. It was Kraft Television Theater in 1955. It was a script for Patterns. If you guys, I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. I guess it's like a movie. When I saw it, it was like a movie, Patterns. You know, that's where that skinny old man, boss, head of the corporation, and the old VP is second in command. It's like trying to get the young guy up. The guy's really brutal. Anyway, that thing really took off. It was like, who's Rod Serling? Who's this guy? Holy cow. Critics. Boom. And then I think the next one was Requiem of a Heavyweight Fighter, or something like, I don't know if I have the title right, but, and again, fantastic reviews. Now Rod Serling's on the map. He's big time. What is he gonna do next? After the Requiem for a Heavyweight, he started doing, you know, this was when television was really starting up. So in 1957, they went to California, they moved. And now he was being stifled. Now again, remember, this guy has Rod Serling. He's got all this creative talent, but his stuff's like on the edge. You know, this got into race sometimes, it got into spirit, religion, a lot of stuff the sponsors weren't comfortable. Well, I should say the sponsors for the corporations that he worked for, the television companies, not comfortable. And he didn't like that. So he finally, like broke out on his own. He's like, I just want to do my own thing. I don't want any of this. I don't want any of this constraints. So he started working on his own, and it was called, his little project was called The Time Element. Submitted it to CBS, and he had thought of this Twilight Zone concept. That's basically what it was, and it was a very cool episode. As I recall, it's a guy who goes to a psychiatrist, and after the session has some kind of twist ending where actually the doctor is the patient. It's like twisted backwards, but you know, typical of what he would do. But it received so much positive response that it was CBS. They agreed to let him go ahead with the Twilight Zone, and it was October 2nd, actually, 1959. The Twilight Zone series premiered on CBS. And Serling had the creative control. 5 seasons, did well. What's really interesting, though, is I don't want to say it did well. It did okay, actually. Now it's like a cult thing. But back then, kind of did average. 5 seasons, and then that was it. Kind of surprising. You know what it tells me? It tells me, in my mind, the guy was way ahead of his time, because now, you know, we watch those, a lot of us watch those over and over and over. And that guy was way ahead of his time. Way ahead of his time. So that was the biggest, of course, part of his career. 1969, he continued on. I call it a split-off, Night Gallery. He did a lot of the writing. And by the way, on Twilight Zone, he wrote not half the episodes. He had good writers, but he wrote a lot of that stuff. Now, Rod Serling was a smoker, as many of you know. I've heard some say 3 packs a day. I hear some say 4 packs a day. But on May 3rd, 1975, he had what would be his first heart attack. In the hospital, 2 weeks, was released. 2 weeks later, another heart attack. So the doctor said, hey, now back then it was risky to do open heart surgery, but they're like, you know, everyone agreed that was the way to go, take the chance. And they did the surgery, but he had another heart attack on the operating table and died. So that was it. It was a very sudden, but the smoking, guys, the smoking, you know, everything in moderation. That was not, you know, 3-4 packs a day. Even 1 pack a day, I think, is going to get you. But he was only 50 years old. His wife actually died very recently, Carol Louise Kramer Serling. She died at 90 years old a couple of years ago, I believe. We're going to see her grave. She's buried here, right here with her husband, right up here. And I see there are some things there at the grave, at Rod's grave. I see a baseball. I see a pickup truck, old pickup truck with pumpkins in the back. I guess that would be like Halloween. And a lot of coins. And of course, the American Legion, which is all bent up. I'll try and straighten that up here. There we go. Of course, right? Somebody wrote on this baseball here, "May you live forever, King of the Twilight Zone." How cool is that? You got a gargoyle. A rock, one rock. I see some other rocks. But the Jewish tradition is the rocks on the grave, out of respect. Well, that's kind of an overview of the Rod Serling story. Rodman E. Serling. Here's Carolyn. Cherished wife, mother, and friend. February 3rd, 1929, January 9th, 2020, so just over 2 years ago. They are together now, reunited. Thank you for your service, Rod Serling, World War II, U.S. Army. His famous words, "Every man is put on earth condemned to die. Time and method of execution unknown." It is true. Rest in peace, Serlings.